In this video we're going to take a look at Showcase 2011, a bunch of the new features and enhancements that have come in that product, and as well I'm going to take you through some basic bits of the workflow of the software for those of you who aren't familiar with what Showcase is or does. But just as a starting point, Showcase at its heart is a visualization and presentation tool. It's really built to be able to take 3D geometry and make it as photoreal as possible and still have it run in a real-time environment. So as you can see here, I've got this microwave. I can move around it in a real-time way. I can see the element glow, I can see the light inside, get reflections, shadows, all of that stuff starts to happen. As another example, let's pull up our watch, and again you can see the reflections happening across the surface, all happening in real time. So what it allows me to do is present an object that doesn't yet actually exist to a group of people and start to make design decisions. I can show them different alternative versions of this object. I can show them different material choices. I can even show them different ways parts can move, and everyone can get their feedback in before we get into a real prototype stage. The other benefit, of course, is you can take products like this, and once you've decided on the design, you can actually use Showcase to create final imagery for marketing or technical manuals, all without having created the real physical prototype or final object yet. So just as one last example, I'm just going to pull up our car here, and let's say we go to this angle, and I'm just going to quickly change the environment out because the white room doesn't really work for the car. And you can see not only do we have the realistic objects, but we can also add in the realistic environments. And adding that realistic environment then means that you can get incredibly realistic imagery because that environment creates reflections, it creates lighting, it does everything for you, all very easily. So someone who is not a skilled visualization expert can use Showcase to get all the way up to these really high photoreal quality images and pre-visualizations with very little ramp-up time. Alright, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of this presentation. What I want to do is take you through the process of taking a small engine that I've imported from Inventor from base CAD model all the way through to photoreal model in a presentation that you can do design review or whatever on, but also create imagery that might get used for brochures, magazines, technical manuals, you name it. As we're going through the process, I'm also going to spend some time just hitting on all the new features and enhancements to functionality as we go. So to start off with, let's just go in File, Import the Model, and what I really want to use is the assembly file for this engine that I'm looking at. And again, coming from Inventor, but I can easily take this from CATIA, Pro Engineer, STEP, SolidWorks, IGES files, you name it, all are available to me. I'm just going to say Open for the assembly. And what we have here is the first change or enhancement that's been made into Showcase 2011, which is the Import Models dialog. We've tried to simplify it and make a cleaner set of conversion settings for you to use. So first off, we have All Purpose, which gives you 3 levels of detail, which are set up basically around a standard size model that's most common coming into Showcase. We have Large Parts version, which gives you again 3 levels of detail, but now it's aimed at it's basically biased to a much larger object, so typically that means the resolution and geometric detail is going to be lower on them. We also have a small parts, small detail version, and this is again for smaller objects. It still gives you the 3 levels of detail, but now they're much higher resolution geometry, which is appropriate to very detailed fine objects. You could also come out with 3 independent levels of detail separately, so you can say I just want a low level of detail version of this import and pick it low, pick medium, pick high, whatever. We'd pick All Purpose. I'm not going to bother doing this import because it'll cost us a couple minutes of time, so I'm just going to cancel, go to the organizer, and unhide what we were already working with. So this is an import directly from Inventor, unchanged at this point, and you can see right off the top that it's already got some materials on it. These were all pre-applied inside of Inventor. So the nice thing here is if you've gone through and put materials, textures, thread maps, weld maps, decals, all of this stuff in Inventor, it will all come through into Showcase, so you don't have to redo any work. You can use it as a great baseline for creating your final photorealistic work. Now I also want you to notice that we have multiple versions of some of the objects here. So we have 2 muffler systems, for instance. So what I'm going to do is, for now we don't need to see both of these, but later on we're going to use them as alternatives. So I'm just going to open this up, take one set of them and hide them so they go away. So there we have our base object, and now I want to just start off by starting to materialize this. So I'm going to open up my material editor, and here you can see I've got materials in the scene, and then I've got a bunch of different libraries. I've set up my own custom library called Small Engine, which is specific for working with these models. So I'm just going to pick on a couple pieces of the exhaust system and throw on a dark shiny steel on there. And then I'm going to go and pick on this sleeve here, and let's throw kind of this rubberized black onto that. Now the housing is actually in a number of different objects that have the same material, so what I can do is select that, right click, and say all objects with this material, and now apply cast metal to those. So again, very quickly, if you've already set up the materials inventor, it's very quick and easy to assign newer, updated, more enhanced materials to those same selections here in Showcase. Now one of the things I do want you to note is, if you look at this here, we got this nice shadow underneath the object, but somehow the main object itself looks kind of like it's glowing. And that's because there are no ambient shadows on it. And the ambient shadows are those little dark areas that come in on the creases and into folds of objects that our eye just expects to see. And right now we're not seeing those. So what I'm going to do is go into Scene, and I'm just going to create some ambient shadows for this. And I'm going to work with preview quality, just because I'm doing this for a demo, but I'd obviously work with a much higher level of quality for a final presentation. And one of the things we've done is we've changed Create Ambient Shadows in 2011 to be more powerful and more flexible with geometric objects. Typically, ambient shadows worked really well on objects you were pulling in from parametric systems, solids modelers like Inventor. But the problem came when you're pulling in stuff from, say, 3ds Max or Maya or some polygonal source. It would basically calculate the ambient shadows based on compute per vertex. So if an area that had to have shadows had very few vertices in it, you tended to get this really low resolution kind of look. So what it does now is it'll automatically calculate based on UVW maps, so the texturing space of the object. So as long as an object has good UV maps, then you'll get good ambient shadows on them. If you want, you can always go back to the earlier version by hitting compute per vertex. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to set it as it is. I'm just going to say create. This is going to go through initializing, and you can see how fast it'll pop it up. There we go. And again, I just want you to notice the kind of the ultimate feeling of reality that comes from having these ambient shadows applied to the object. Now these ones are maybe a little bit dark, so again I'm going to go back up into Scene and just adjust the shadows a little bit and just bring them down to about 80%. But you can see that having these little shadows everywhere really does make a big difference in the believability of the object. Now I could keep going through all of this and making modifications, but what I'm going to do instead is hide this model, and I'm going to open up a new version. And this is one that I've spent a lot more time on. Basically spent a couple hours just tweaking materials and things like that to make it look pretty. And imagine you've gotten to this point, you've spent a couple hours, you've made it all look nice, and then you suddenly realize, oh geez, this embossed 12, I actually need to be a shiny buffed metal material different from the rest of the object. Well, if I pick on it, you'll see I can't actually pick the 12 because it's one solid object. This wasn't separated out in Inventor, so I can't deal with it directly. So what this means is normally you go back and you separate out in Inventor, you re-import the objects you affected, reapply the materials, do all that. So it's a lot of extra work to go and make the change. Well, now what I can do is simply go into Edit and fix object patches, extract patches as new object. And now I can just pick the pieces that I want to have separated and say extract as new object. Close that dialog down, pick the 12, and I can apply my shiny steel to it, and it's now a separate thing. And I haven't had to adjust any of the other materials of these objects. Very powerful way to go and make these changes without really causing me lots of problems later. Now we've got the basic model in here. Last thing we want to do to make it look nice is maybe put it in a good environment. So if I open up my environments panel, you'll see here we've got one environment scene, which is the basic white. We've now gone and organized our environments area into different categories to make things a little easier to keep track of. So you can add as many environments as you want to this and categorize them nicely. We've also added a number of new environments. For instance, we have this country road environment, we have a daylight gypsum crater environment. I'm going to use one of the new environments. Specifically, I'm going to use old warehouse. So I'm just going to click on that. Now this environment when it comes in is going to be a little big for the model. So I'm simply going to go into Scene Environment Properties. There we are, and I'm just going to scale it down to right about there. So now it's a little more appropriately scaled for the size of this engine. And you can see we're getting these great highlights and shines and reflections happening all over the surface. So now what I want to do is take one last step on kind of the visual quality of this. If you go into View and look under Camera Properties, there's a new function in here called Lens Distortion Light Bloom. And what this does is really probably best to just show you. Look at the highlights here in the reflection. If I turn it on, you'll see it start to glow. I can make that glow larger, and I can also make it more intense. And now as you move around, you can really see kind of these intense blooming highlights all around the object. What it does is it gives you a more realistic look when you think about looking through the lens of a camera. Also, it's a great way to double for doing a glow on intense objects like headlights, things like that. So it has multiple uses, and it's very powerful. So now we've got our base object, we've set up a glow, we've made it look good in a really nice environment. Now we want to start setting it up for actual presentation. So before we get too far in, let's start to explain some of the working components you have inside of Showcase to do a presentation, because this is really what Showcase is built for, is to be able to do these kind of design review. Let's look at all the different versions of this object, decide which way we want to go, but we want to do it in a very realistic and iterative fashion. So in order to be able to do that type of stuff, there's a number of components. First we have shots, and shots are essentially camera shots. So you could have a zoom, a pan, a tilt, all set up around objects, and you have them all preset here so you can quickly click on them like this, and it'll automatically run that shot from that angle. Now on top of shots, you have alternatives. Now alternatives are all different variations on the objects in your scene. So for instance, earlier on we saw the two different muffler sets. Well, here you can see those are the two muffler sets right there. I've set them up as alternatives now, so with one click I can flip all the different objects over to a different version. Beauty of this is it's very easy to do. I simply select a bunch of geometry and assign it to one of the alternatives, and now every time I click on it, that's what I get. So very easy to work with. You can also notice that I can do the same with materials. I'm changing materials here or here, again using these alternatives. So what it allows me to do is take a relatively small number of different changes and turn them into nearly infinite varieties that we can test out when we're doing reviews. Say, well, what does it look like with the first version of the muffler system with the red color scheme and the dark casing? And very quickly now I can see what that looks like. Everyone can make a comment. So that's alternatives. Next you get into the side of behaviors. And all behaviors is animation. So I can assign a behavior to any object in the scene and have it do something. So this could be animations to open and close doors, to spin the hands on a watch face, whatever you might want to do to, again, impart the feeling that this object exists. So I'm just going to go through and pick on the alternative that I want for now, and we're just going to say blue like that. And the last thing we want to do is show you where this all comes together, and that's really in the storyboard. So you had all those alternatives, you had all those shots, you can go through and click on them manually and drive them. But often a better way to work is to actually set up some sort of pre-scripted storyboard of actions that you want to occur, and that way you can just cycle through them, hit play, and it'll just run, and everyone can make comments. So here you can see a number of slides in our storyboard, and if I open up this slide here, you can see all this slide does is contain a bunch of those building blocks. So we have the blue alternative for the color scheme, we have the version 1 alternative for the muffler, we have the no cutaway version for the object. All of this then defines what this slide will look like. If you hit play, this will happen for 15 seconds, and then it'll go on to the next slide, green, which will use all the same alternatives, except it'll also use the green alternative for the color scheme, and then on to red and yellow and so forth. Now what you're seeing here is kind of the old way of setting this type of thing up. Now we could actually combine all of this into a single slide if we wanted to, and I'm going to show you basically how that works. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new storyboard slide, and this one's just a blank. I'm going to open up my alternatives, and I'm going to start off by saying, yes, let's use this alternative, add it to the storyboard. We'll use the worn material, we'll use this brown version of the casing, and that's really what we need. I'll also add the blue just to be sure that it's set. Once I've done that, I could go through and just set an image for the slide so it's ready to go. Now, the next thing is, what do we want to do inside of this storyboard slide? Well, what I want to do is I want to orbit around the object, and then at the end of the orbit I want to zoom in and look at a detail. So again, I'm just going to move this here. I'm going to hold Control and Alt and click on the casing, which will set our focus of our camera. Now I'm going to open up our shots. We need to create a couple shots to make those moves. So I'm simply going to go and say Create Cinematic. And in here, Cinematic, we can create any number of different types of camera moves. In this particular case, we're going to use a new one called Orbit. So I'm just going to click on Orbit, and right now it's set up to go 180 degrees around the object. We want 360, so it's going to go all the way around the object in 5 seconds. I could also have it corkscrew up or down just by changing the amount the camera goes up or down as it spins. We're going to leave that alone though. I'm also going to turn off the fade from black. We're just going to cut to this shot no matter what else it was doing. Once I've done that, I can preview. It's a little fast probably, but for this demo it'll get the job done. So I'm going to say Close. Now that we spun it, we want to zoom in. So I'm going to create another cinematic shot. This one will be a zoom in of 15 centimeters. Again, taking 5 seconds, and I can preview it. And you can see we had the fade from black there, so I'm going to want to get rid of that. So let's just, again, take that back to a cut and say Good. Now we still need to zoom back out. So what I'm going to do is play the zoom in just by clicking on it. So I get into the point that I want. Now I'm going to go and create a cinematic, and in this one we're going to say Zoom Out. And we're going to say 15 centimeters because it's the same amount we zoomed in, and turn off fade from black and close. So now we can double check simply by running the orbit shot first, and then we can do the zoom in, and you can see there was no pop, so we've got a perfect match of the two shots. And then we can do a zoom out, again no pop, so we've got a perfect match. So we're good to go. So now I can just start adding these to the current storyboard. And we're ready on that. Now, one other thing you should note is any of these at any point I can render out to a video if I want to hand this off to someone. So I can simply go and say Save Shot as Movie and dump that out. And you can actually see what that looks like here if I just simply go in and load it up. So there we go, a rendered out version of that shot. Now, we've got all our shots in place. Now what do we want to do once we get in close to the housing? Well, what I'd like to do is cut away the object so I can see the insides. So in order to do that, I'm going to hit X on the keyboard and pull out a new system called cross sections. And what cross sections allow me to do is slice away objects to look inside. So I'm simply going to go through, pick on a few of these objects, just like so, and now I go to Create, Cross Section Plane, and you can see it immediately slices it away. And now I'm just going to slide this more to a vertical position, like so, and you can see I can now move it in and out and slice it. Well, first let's go through and just change the color. Just white was a little too harsh. I'm going to close that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide it so it's completely off the model. Because what I want to do is I want to animate this happening. So to do that, now I'm going to call on behaviors. Create inside of behaviors, keyframe animation. Because my cross section is selected, it's automatically going to assume that's what I'm keyframing. And we'll end up with this little timeline which I can use to set up my keyframes. So my initial key is set at 0, which is putting the cross section off the object. So I'm just going to slide forward, say 2 seconds. Go up here, slide my cross section into the model, hit a keyframe. Move forward a couple more seconds. I'm going to hit another keyframe, so for that 2 seconds the cross section doesn't move. Now I'm going to slide forward another 2 seconds, pull the cross section back off, hit another keyframe. So now what I've done is I've created an animation that has the cross section slide into the model, hold there for 2 seconds, and then slide back out. So I can close that. I can take this keyframe animation, go and add it to the current slide, and say play forward. So now we're basically set up to go with a final storyboard slide. Now I need to change how these all interact with each other. So I can go in, and something else that's new is this ability to, again, look at a timeline view of all the elements of the storyboard slide and rearrange them. So I'm just going to jump out a little bit more, and you can see this is our orbit, this is our zoom in, and this would be our zoom out. So I'm going to space those out a few seconds, just so it zooms in and then holds during this empty space, and then continues. Here's the keyframe animation, so let's just slide that out so it happens over that gap between the zoom in and the zoom out. Once I've done that, I can simply hit play, and we can see the whole thing do its spin, and then we'll do a zoom in, and then it'll do a cutaway, and then the cutaway will pull back out, and we're done. So that becomes the shot. Now I can take it one step further. Maybe I actually want to, as I said, mix in all these color alternatives into the same shot. Well, I can open up alternatives and simply say, well, let's add green to the current storyboard, red to the current storyboard, and yellow to the current storyboard. You'll see down here they've automatically been added as one of our alternative sets, and now I can space them out however I want. So at this point, if I close it, go in again, and hit play, you'll see the colors actually change as we're spinning through looking at the various versions. So we've now got the storyboard slide created. It's got a bunch of complex things going on. What happens if the machine you're on isn't quite powerful enough to do this without staggering a little bit here and there as it makes changes? Or maybe you ultimately have to do this presentation on, say, a laptop or somewhere where you have no control of the hardware. Well, you can actually go through and right-click on this and simply say, I want to save this slide as a movie. And what you'd get then, if I go down here and take a look, is exactly what you would expect. Here is that rendered version of what you were just looking at. So again, the power of Showcase is the fact that we can do all of this work in real time, but we do have to recognize that sometimes you're going to be stuck in an environment or on a machine where maybe that's not the ideal thing. Other times is you may just want to send a rendering off to someone so they can look at it who doesn't even have access to Showcase. So there is that option. To take it one step further, you can take this entire storyboard that you've set up, go to create and say make a flash movie from the slides. And basically what you can do is you can arrange all the different storyboard slides into two menus that can be either set top or bottom or left and right. And so I can say, okay, the blue, green, red, yellow should all be on the top choices. This one here, my cutaway should be on the bottom. And then I can put labels, so I can say color for the top and cut away for the bottom. And now I can simply go through and say, save me a movie, and it'll create that. So if I want to go and just take a look at what that does, let's just pull that up. So it creates me automatically a nice little web file. And let's just size this down to about what it was actually supposed to be. And now you can see I can quickly go through and actually pick on the various versions and cutaways and whatever I want, and it'll play those videos down for me. So again, giving you as many different ways as you can do this presentation as possible. In this particular case, you could have actually published it up to an internal website for review, or you could take it with you on a DVD and just pop it into someone else's machine, and it'll give them a way to look at it. So all of that said and done, ultimately you get to the point where, okay, design review is approved, people love it, now they want to actually get final renders that they can use to start marketing this piece before it's made. So I'm just going to, again, take the alternatives out, make that go away, make behaviors go away, and really it all comes down to settings. So I can go in, up till now we've been using the hardware renderer, so now I can go to the interactive ray tracing settings and start to say, well, what kind of quality do I want my rendering to be? And at any point, once I've got it set, I can turn on ray tracing. So ray tracing is now on, and you can see it starts to iteratively refine the quality. Anytime I can go into my settings again and say, well, yeah, I want to see object shadows on there, so now shadows start to appear. I'd like to see ambient shadows on that as well, so those start to appear, and the quality will continue to get better. Once I've got the general quality settings that I want, well, then it becomes easy. Now I just go to File, Save Image As, and I can set up, do I want viewport resolution, a specific paper size, a photo size, and then I set up what the DPI is going to be, and I hit render and I let it kick out an image. So basically we can start from a very simple looking CAD drawing, CAD model, bring in a Showcase, materialize it, put camera moves on it, give you a bunch of alternate variations, let you do design review on a photorealistic model in real time, and then ultimately kick out magazine images or technical support imagery quickly and easily without the person using Showcase having to be a design visualization professional. This is something that is so easy to use. You can pick it up and do it once or twice every couple of months. It's not hard. The first time I used Showcase, it took me about 4 or 5 hours to get to the point where I was basically doing most of what you're seeing here. It's really quite easy to use, and hopefully you can find a lot of uses for it.